If you had put $5,000 into SpaceX in 2008, you'd have over $5 million today. If you'd gotten into Palantir before its IPO, you'd be sitting on a 40x return. Most people reading this missed both. Not because they didn't have the money, not because they weren't smart enough. They missed it because nobody showed them where to look. Today, I'm going to show you the next one. And I promise you, by the time this is on CNBC, it'll already be too late to get in at this price. I want you to think back to 2008 for a second. SpaceX had just blown up 3 rockets in a row. 3. The 4th launch was do or die. Elon Musk himself said if that one failed, the company was finished. Nobody was lining up to write a check. Nobody on Wall Street was talking about it at dinner parties. It looked like a rich guy's expensive hobby that was about to end in a very public, very expensive failure, and then it didn't fail. And the people who got in before that 4th launch, the ones who took a position when it still looked insane, those are the people sitting on returns that sound made up. $5,000 into SpaceX in 2008 isn't $5,000 today. It's millions. Multiple millions. From one decision made years before anyone else even knew there was a decision to make. Now here's the thing I really want you to sit with. The people who made that bet, were they smarter than you? Did they have some secret insight into rocket engines that you don't have? No, most of them weren't engineers. Most of them weren't space experts. What they had was something much simpler and much more frustrating to hear. They were in the room. Somebody showed them the deal. That's the entire difference between a multi-million-dollar outcome and a story you tell at a dinner party about the one that got away. Same story with Palantir. Years before that company ever rang a bell on the NYSE, it was raising money from a small circle of investors who had access most people will never have. By the time Palantir hit the public markets and showed up in your brokerage app next to Apple and Tesla, the early money had already made 40, 50, 60 times their investment. The IPO wasn't the opportunity. The IPO was the finish line. The opportunity was years earlier in a room you weren't in. I bring up these two specifically because I bet almost everyone listening to me right now has a version of this story already. Maybe it's not SpaceX or Palantir by name. Maybe it's Bitcoin in 2012 when somebody told you about it and you said, that's not real money. Maybe it's a friend who tried to get you into a deal in college and you didn't have $2,000 to spare. Maybe it's Uber or Airbnb or Stripe. All private for years, all minting fortunes for insiders before the rest of us ever got a chance to buy in. And if you've got that story, I know exactly what it feels like. It's not even really about the money, is it? It's that sick feeling of watching something happen in slow motion and knowing somewhere in the back of your mind you saw it coming and you didn't move. That regret doesn't fade. It just sits there. But here's what I need you to really understand, because this is the whole reason I'm standing here talking to you. That feeling, that's not proof you're bad at this. That's not proof you missed your shot and now the window's closed forever. What it actually proves is something much more useful. The pattern is real. It happens again and again and again. Category-defining companies don't start on the stock exchange. They start small, private, and invisible to almost everyone. And then, by design, only a narrow circle gets the invitation before the rest of the world finds out. The only variable that changed between the people who got rich off SpaceX and Palantir and the people who just read about it afterward was access, not intelligence, not timing the market perfectly, not some inside knowledge of rocket science or data analytics. Just were you in the room or weren't you? So I'm not here to make you feel bad about the deals you missed. I'm here because that exact same pattern is playing out again right now in front of us. And this time, you're not on the outside looking in. This time, you're in the room. So let's talk about why I'm standing here right now, in this moment, telling you this instead of just letting you find out about it later on the news. Because that's the part that actually matters. Not just the pattern repeats, but why this specific company, right now, is the one sitting exactly where SpaceX was in 2008, exactly where Palantir was years before anyone outside a boardroom had heard the name. Start with the founders, because that's always where it starts. Every company that's gone on to be a generational outcome had people at the top who'd already proven they could build something from nothing. People who'd done this before who weren't learning on the job with your money. Plexalo. Insert founder pedigree, prior exits, technical background, notable early backers. That's not a coincidence. The market doesn't hand category-defining outcomes to first-timers. It hands them to people who've already shown you they know exactly what they're doing and just haven't done it at this scale yet. Then look at what they're actually building. SpaceX wasn't just another rocket company. Palantir wasn't just another software company. Both of them were doing something nobody else could replicate easily, something with a real moat around it. That's what you have to look for. And it's exactly what's sitting in front of us with Hong Hollow Company. Insert the specific technology, the defensibility, why competitors can't simply copy this. This isn't an incremental improvement on something that already exists. This is the kind of thing that 5 years from now, an entire industry gets rebuilt around. Now, here's where it gets real, because I don't want you taking my word for any of this. I want you looking at the numbers yourself. Felix Company has already raised insert funding round figures from insert notable institutional backers. Their valuation has moved from insert early valuation to insert current valuation in the span of insert timeframe. That's not speculation. That's not a hunch I have. That's money. Serious, sophisticated, do their homework money, already voting with hundreds of millions of dollars that this is the real thing. And just like SpaceX had NASA contracts before it had public market hype, just like Palantir had government and enterprise deals locking in real revenue before Wall Street ever cared, Hong Hollow Company already has insert contracts, partnerships, or enterprise customers generating real current revenue. This isn't a story about potential someday. This is a company already doing the thing, already getting paid for it, already proving the model works in the real world, while it's still private, while it's still small enough that getting in actually changes your financial life instead of just rounding out a portfolio. Here's the part I really need you to hear, though, because this is where most people get it wrong. They think, I'll just wait. I'll wait until it's a little more proven, a little less risky, and then I'll get in. And I understand that instinct. But that instinct is exactly what kept people out of SpaceX in 2008 and out of Palantir years before its IPO. By the time it feels safe, by the time it's been validated by everyone, by the time it's a headline on CNBC, the price has already moved. The early money has already made their 40, 50, 60 times. You're not buying the opportunity anymore at that point. You're buying what's left of it. This window, the one we're standing in right now, today, is not permanent. Plebs Caelor. Insert specific timeline, next funding round, or closing date. After that, this conversation doesn't exist anymore. There's no version of this talk that happens again once that round closes, once the company goes public. Once it's a name, everybody already knows. This is the part of the story where you get to decide which side of it you're on. So let's say everything I've just told you actually lands. Let's say you're sitting there thinking, okay, I believe the pattern. I believe this is the real deal. I don't want to be the person 5 years from now telling this story with the wrong ending. The next question is the only one that actually matters. How do you get in? And I want to address something honestly, because most people watching something like this have a quiet little voice in the back of their head saying, this is for other people. This is for hedge funds. This is for guys in San Francisco with the right last name and the right college roommate. That voice has been trained into you by years of watching the biggest opportunities sit behind doors you were never given a key to. And I get why you'd think that, because for a long time it was true. But that's not the world we're in right now. Plebs Caelor. Explain in plain language what's actually required. Accredited investor status, income net worth thresholds, or whether this is open to non-accredited investors under current regulations. This isn't some backroom deal that requires you to know somebody. It requires you to meet insert actual criteria, and that's genuinely it. I want to be straight with you about that, because the whole point of what I'm doing is closing the gap between regular person and person with access, not pretending that gap doesn't exist. Here's what the actual process looks like, step by step, so there's no mystery left in this by the time I'm done talking. Plebs Caelor outline the platform or vehicle being used, e.g. a specific investment platform, a fund structure, a direct allocation. You go to insertplatform.link. You'll need insert documentation, ID verification, accreditation proof, etc. The minimum to participate is insert minimum investment amount. And I want you to actually hear that number, because I think a lot of you are picturing something with 6 zeros on it. This is not that. This is built so that the same kind of access that used to require a board seat now requires insert realistic minimum. Once you're in, insert basic mechanics. How shares or units are held, any lockup period, how updates are communicated. I'm not going to stand here and tell you there's zero risk, because anyone who tells you that is lying to you, and you should run from anyone who tells you that about a private company. What I will tell you is this. The risk of getting in early on something real is a very different kind of risk than the guaranteed loss of watching from the sidelines while it happens without you. One of those risks you can manage. The other one you can't undo. Now, the part I really need you to sit with, the deadline. Insert specific closing date, funding round cutoff, or capacity limit. This isn't artificial urgency. This isn't a marketing trick where I tell you doors closing soon and then magically reopen them in 3 weeks. Reiterate why the deadline is real. E.g., the round closes when it closes, the allocation is capped. The company moves to its next stage with or without you. After that date, this conversation is over. Not paused, over. The opportunity I've spent the last however many minutes laying out for you simply will not exist in this form again. So here's where I'll leave you. Somewhere out there right now is a version of you 5 years from now. And that version of you is going to tell a story about this exact moment, about watching this, hearing this, knowing this was in front of you. The only thing that's still undecided is how that story ends. You already know how the SpaceX story ends for the people who said not yet. You already know how the Palantir story ends for the people who waited for the headline. Don't let this be that story too. So let's bring this all the way back to where we started. SpaceX, 2008. 3 failed launches, no guarantees, almost nobody willing to bet on it. Palantir, years before anyone outside a boardroom had heard the name, quietly building something that would go on to make early investors 40, 50, 60 times their money. 2 stories you've already heard the ending to. 2 stories where the only difference between the people who got rich and the people who just watched from the outside was one single thing: access. Not intelligence, not timing, not some secret only insiders understood, just whether or not they were in the room. I showed you why this moment, right now, is that same room. Founders who've already proven they can build something real. A technology with an actual moat around it, not something that gets copied in 6 months. Serious money already in, not retail hype, not speculation, but the kind of institutional capital that does its homework before it writes a check. Real contracts, real revenue, real proof that this isn't a someday story. It's happening right now, while it's still small enough, still private enough, that getting in actually changes something for you. And I gave you the part that matters most. Not just why, but how. No backroom deal. No need to know somebody. A clear minimum. A clear process. A real deadline that closes whether or not you act on it. So here's what I want you to actually do with everything you just heard. Not someday. Not I'll think about it and circle back. Right now, while this is still fresh, while the window is still open, take the next step. Go to Insert Platform Landing. Get your questions answered. Get verified. Decide today which side of this story you're going to be on, because in 5 years, this moment is going to be a memory. And there are only 2 versions of that memory available to you. In one, you're telling someone about the time you heard about this, felt that same pull in your gut you felt watching SpaceX and Palantir take off without you, and you let it pass anyway. In the other, you're the person someone else is listening to. The one who got in the room when it mattered, while everyone else was still waiting for the headline. You already know how the first story ends. You've lived it before. This time, write the second one.